Looks like our numbers are still going up a little bit, but it's slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Welcome, everybody. Oh, that's not clicked there quite yet. My name is Craig Dietrich here from the Office of Student Aid. And thanks for joining us this evening. We appreciate the opportunity to share some information with you. So our goal for tonight is to review some information about the FAFSA, or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and also give you some information about the processes and timelines specific to Penn State. So some of this information is going to be a repeat of what we shared in our last webinar, but we'll kind of go over some new things as well. All right, so our learning objectives for this evening. Number one, we want you to learn about Penn State's FAFSA processes and next steps after your FAFSA is filed. And again, keep in mind that it did open officially October 1st, although we heard it was actually opened about a week ago. So it is out there now, ready for you to file. We want you to gain some insight on the suggested FAFSA deadlines specific to Penn State. We want you to obtain some helpful reminders and resources to file your FAFSA. We want you to understand Penn State's estimated aid offer timelines for both new and continuing students. And we want you to access some knowledge on Penn State's various enrollment management systems. So the two systems that we use, the initial one is going to be called My Penn State, and then eventually you'll get access to LionPATH, which is the full system, and we'll talk about those a little later. All right. So just a reminder, we did do a crash course for first-time filers back in September on the 18th. That is posted out there on our site. You can use the QR code there to access that, or go to our YouTube page to watch that. Again, some of what we're going to share tonight is a repeat of what's there, but there's a lot more details from that webinar on the 18th of September. So what is the FAFSA? FAFSA, again, stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And at Penn State, it is the only application that we use to determine what aid students are eligible for. Some other institutions might use the CSS profile. We do not use that at Penn State. It's only the FAFSA. So you can complete it in two different methods, electronically, and that's what we highly suggest or recommend you do. Typically, the electronic applications can be processed in as little as about 1 or 2 days, 3 days at the most. So it's pretty quick. Or you can mail it in by paper form. Some families will be required to mail it in by paper, unfortunately, but we can tell you that the processing time for that is going to be much longer. Typically, by the time you mail it in the mail and then have it processed, you're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks at least. A couple of changes for this year in the FAFSA. One big change is that they took away the gender question on the demographics section, and it's now a legal sex question with only 2 options, male or female. Just so that people are aware, when you're filing the FAFSA electronically, if you don't answer that question, it will not allow you to proceed any further. If you file the paper FAFSA and you don't answer that legal sex question, your FAFSA will be rejected and won't even be processed. So just something that you need to be aware of. All right, so the FAFSA is the application form for both prospective and current students to complete to receive financial aid, and it must be completed every year. So for students that are going to start next fall, that would be the 26-27 academic year. Students currently at Penn State or students that might be starting next summer, that would be the 25-26 academic year. We'll talk about that a little more here shortly. Typically takes about less than an hour to complete. Some people complete it in even a half hour to 45 minutes. That's both for the student and the parent section. And it's used to assess your financial aid eligibility for federal aid, state aid, and institutional aids. So things like grants, scholarships, federal work study, and even loans as well. All right. What are the eligibility requirements to file the FAFSA? Number one, you must be a high school graduate. Well, obviously, students that are in their senior year now haven't graduated yet. So when you're filing your FAFSA, there's going to be a question that asks you, will you be a graduate when you start at the university? So obviously, nobody has graduated yet, but make sure you answer that question yes, because when you start at Penn State, you will be a graduate. If you answer no, and it's a common mistake a lot of people make, they will make you ineligible. And then we found out last year the correction to go in and correct that and fix it can be a little bit complicated. So we want to make sure you answer that question correctly initially. Again, will you be a graduate when you start? The answer is yes. Okay, you must also be actively enrolled in an eligible degree or certificate program. You must have a valid Social Security number. You must be a U.S. citizen or have obtained citizenship status through naturalization. Or you must be an eligible non-citizen. If you're not sure if you're an eligible non-citizen, the best way to figure that out would be to go out to the studentaid.gov site or use the QR code here on this slide, and it will kind of walk you through and tell you what you need to be in order to be considered an eligible non-citizen. Okay, you can have a green card or have a T visa. So those are all things to keep in mind. But again, if you're not sure, if you're an eligible non-citizen, go out to the studentaid.gov site, use this QR code. They'll walk you through and make sure you know whether you are or not. Once you log in and submit on the section to complete the FAFSA, this is the landing page that you'll get. Notice that it will come up automatically with the 2627 FAFSA. And again, it is live out there now. Only site that you need to use for anything pertaining to federal aid, loans, etc. is studentaid.gov, so one place. You'll also notice here on this page, you see underneath where it says start a new form, there's also the 2526 FAFSA form eligible. As I mentioned earlier, for any students that might be considering starting in the summer, summer is a trailing semester at Penn State, so it's still part of the 2526 academic year. So if you're starting in the summer and you want to be considered for aid options for summer, you're going to have to complete not one, but two FAFSAs, both 2526 and 2627. So keep in mind that the FAFSA uses prior tax information. So for the 2627 FAFSA, it'll be pulling information from the IRS based upon 2024 taxes. For 2526, it'll be pulling information based upon your 23 taxes. All right. So again, any students looking to start summer start or leap, if you want aid eligibility for the summer, again, file at 2526 FAFSA. One thing I will mention for students now as well, if you consider taking summer classes at any other point in your Penn State career, we highly suggest you reach out to our office and ask what your aid eligibility might be for the summer. Aid options for the summer typically are pretty limited, so you want to make sure that you're aware of what you're going to have available before you schedule those summer classes. All right. So when should you file the FAFSA? It does open, or at least officially October 1st. Again, it was open about a week ago, so it's definitely out there now. We do recommend you file it as early as possible. There are certain deadlines out there for certain scholarships or grants that could be affected. So at Penn State, some of the aid opportunities that we have are first come, first serve. So sometimes the aid runs out. If you file it a little later, you might miss out on some opportunities. So always a good idea to file it as quickly as you can. We always suggest that maybe you don't want to do it right away. Sometimes there's a few bugs and kinks that need to be worked out. I think that's why they released it a week early. So hopefully we're good to go at this point. But if you can get it filed by even in November or by the end of this calendar year, you'll be in pretty good shape. So we'll talk about some of the recommended filing timelines here in a little bit. So 2526 FAFSA, noticed it didn't open until December last year because of some delays, but you could actually file it up to the end of June of 2026. So that's the actual deadline for filing it. But again, we're going to talk about Penn State's recommended things. 2526 FAFSA is aid opportunities for fall 25, spring 26, and summer 26. 2627 opened again officially yesterday, but about a week ago. You can file it up till June 30th of 2027. And that's your aid opportunities for fall 26, spring 27, and also summer of 2027. Before you can file your FAFSA, you need to create an FSA ID. All students will have to create an FSA ID. That's going to be what you use to sign your FAFSA and make it official. And any parent contributor on the FAFSA. Now, parent contributor could be one parent, or it could be multiple parents, depending upon your situation. There's some good resources out there to help you figure out who exactly needs to have the FSA ID to make sure that you know that information. So it used to be the FSA ID took about 3 days for the Social Security Administration to validate and approve before you could use it. This year, that's supposed to happen instantaneously. So if you create the FSA ID, theoretically, you should be able to use it right away. Excuse me. We're suggesting you try to file it or get your FSA ID created at least 1 day before you start the application for the FAFSA. A couple of things to keep in mind here. When you create that FSA ID, it's very important to type your name exactly as it appears on your Social Security card. And again, the Social Security Administration is going to verify that information. So if your name isn't the same as it is on your card, it could cause some delays. Make sure you type your birth date in correctly. Don't make a mistake there. Social Security number. When your FAFSA comes in, we compare that to the information that we have. And if there's any mismatches, anything doesn't match up, it could delay you being offered an aid package and could delay your financial aid from dispersing. So just keep that in mind. For high school students, you do need to use an email. Make sure you don't use your high school email because that high school email is going to go away after you graduate. You need to have access to that email for your entire college career. So use a personal email. All right. Lots of good resources out there, again, studentaid.gov, to kind of help you walk through that and determine, again, who all the contributors would need to be. One point of contention, there's always some confusion about the asset or the investment questions that you have to put on the FAFSA. Now, depending upon your financial information, that's going to get pulled automatically from the IRS. You have to get permission for that to happen now. If your income is below a certain threshold, you may not have to add any asset or investment questions at all. It just depends. Most people do have to add that. So here we kind of have a screen comparing what is considered investments and what's not. Okay, I will caution you here that assets, your cash checkings and savings account amount as of the day you file the FAFSA, so that's always an asset question that has to be filled, but the cash savings and checkings is not an investment. So there's two different parts there. You got the asset question and then investments. So what is considered an investment? That would be real estate, not including the home that you live in, okay, or any real estate owned by a business. But you do need to include rental property. If you have properties that you rent out, or if you have a second vacation home, something like that, those values do need to be included as investments on your FAFSA. If you're renting out a place in the home that you live in to someone other than a family member, that would have to be counted as well. Okay, trust funds, UGMA or UTMA accounts, money market funds, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, options, and bonds, securities, tax shelters, all of these things. The bottom one is qualified education benefits or education savings accounts, commonly referred to as a 529 plan. So 529 plans owned by the parents or by the students that are used for that particular student. If you have more than one student, you only account the 529 that's for the student that you're filing the FAFSA for. If you've got more than one student, you do need to file separate FAFSAs for each. So again, things that are not considered investments. We already mentioned the home in which you live in. Again, the cash check and savings is an asset question, so it's not an investment as well. Okay, ABLE accounts, any life insurance or retirement plans, 401k plans, pension funds, annuities, IRAs, etc. So the way to kind of keep it in mind is anything that you can access right now that is typically usually considered an asset or investment. If it's something that's not accessible until down the line in the future, then typically it's not. Okay. Another thing that changed recently was the value of a business. For the longest time, if you had a family-owned business that had less than 100 employees, you did not have to include it. The last couple of years, they made you include it. They've decided to go back to not having that included. So if you have a family-owned business with less than 100 employees, that does not have to be reported as an asset any longer. Also, they made a change where any farm investment property used to have to be included. Now it's not included again. So they do make some changes from time to time. So again, if you're unsure about what you need to put, lots of good resources out there that you can access to kind of help you guide you. All right, here's some of those resources. So there's a QR code, again, takes you to the studentaid.gov site. Lots of different help center topics out there. Information that you can take a look at before you start filing your form to make sure that you're ready. How to walk you through starting the actual filing of the form. The account username and password, the FSA ID that we mentioned. Again, contributor information. Again, it might be one parent. If your parents are filing a joint tax return, then only one parent needs to have an FSA ID. The parents would be married, but filing separately, they both would have to have. So there's other situations depending upon, again, the marital status and so forth. So again, use the resources out here if you have questions. So FAFSA financial information support, how to sign and submit the FAFSA, your submission summary, which is a review of all the things that you filled out. You'll get that after your FAFSA is filed. We suggest you take a look at it, make sure that there's no discrepancies there, nothing that is incorrect. There's some troubleshooting, lots of good videos and infographics out there, and lots of other resources and topics. So again, anything that you need, you can find it out there, typically on that studentaid.gov site. Here's some good specific sites or phone numbers. There is a FAFSA help center number. It's 1-800-4-FED-AID. Okay, one thing is if you're having issues with filing your FAFSA, you might want to try to reach out to our office and ask for assistance. Typically, we can't really assist too much. We can offer some general tips and strategies, but if you're having issues with being able to submit the FAFSA for some reason, you're going to need to work with FAFSA or FSA. So reach out to that helpline, or you can contact it through the site as well. There's lots of other sites there for you with some good information. That parent contributor wizard is very helpful and kind of walks you through to decide, again, who your contributors are going to be and who all would need to have the FSA ID. Here's some additional helpful tips. There's information on the business and farm that I mentioned earlier. There's the resource center that we have on our website, psu.edu. And then there is some information about how the financial aid is calculated. They talk a little bit about how the process works and how they calculate your student aid index, or that SAI, which dictates what aid you might be eligible for. So again, lots of good resources out there. Very important to make sure when you file your FAFSA, you include Penn State's school code. Our school code is 003329. That is for both University Park and all of our Commonwealth campuses. Okay, so one code for all campuses. You can search it by typing in the name of the university, but every year we have a handful of students that think they're sending their FAFSA to us at Penn State, and when they start typing it in, they inadvertently send it to the University of Pennsylvania. So just be careful. You can search by name, but if you have the actual school code, that's going to be even better yet. So 003329 for any campus at Penn State, with one exception. That would be if you decide to go to Penn State College of Technology or Penn College of Technology. Even though they're part of Penn State, their financial aid works a little bit differently, so they do have their own school code. So anybody going to Penn College of Technology, you want to use 003395 as the school code for them. All right. Here's our suggested timelines. We highly suggest or encourage students for new students, file their FAFSA by December 15th. Again, we told you that the actual deadline is not until June 30th of 2027. But again, we wanted to make sure that you're in our first round of awarding, and we'll talk about the awarding timeline here in a little bit. So to make sure you are in there, December 15th, that's kind of the date that you want to put on your mind or in your calendar. If you filed a little after that, that's probably okay, but you definitely want to make sure for certain you have it filed by the end of January, and you'll see why. Again, try to get it done by the end of the calendar year. You know you're set to go. For current students, the recommended filing deadline is April 15th. Okay, the awarding timeline for continuing students is a little different, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Something to keep in mind if you're from the state of Pennsylvania is that to be eligible for any of FEA's programs, FEA is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, you must file your FAFSA before May 1st. If you file it after May 1st, you will be ineligible for any of the programs that FEA offers. And that means you could miss out on some free grant money and lots of other nice programs that they offer. So again, get filed by the end of the calendar year, you'll be in good shape. More information about FEA is accessible there on the QR code that you see on the screen, or you can go to the FEA.org site. All right, so after your FAFSA has been filed, it's been processed. Now, you're going to get an email from FAFSA saying that your FAFSA has been processed. That does not mean that we have processed it at Penn State. So those are two independent events. Okay, at Penn State, we're not going to start probably loading FAFSAs until November, December at the earliest, maybe even January. It just depends upon how things go. So you want to make sure that not only is your FAFSA processed from the FAFSA side of things, but you want to make sure that we have it at Penn State. And the way that you'll know that is you'll get an email letting you know that that Penn State has received it and it's been processed. If you're unsure, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to check and some troubleshooting kind of ideas here in a few minutes. You can always give us a call, stop by the office, reach out, and very quickly we can let you know whether your FAFSA has been received and processed. But again, keep in mind that we're not even going to start loading them until probably December, maybe even into January. So it'll be after the new year, probably for sure. All right. So there's two systems that you need to be familiar with at Penn State. First one is called My Penn State, and the second one is called LionPATH. My Penn State is kind of a abbreviated version of LionPATH. It gives you access to some very basic information and things that you need initially as you're doing the application process and all of that. And then once you become admitted officially to Penn State, you'll set up access to your full LionPATH account where you get access to a lot more stuff. And we'll talk about some of those things here in a little bit. All right. So for My Penn State account, this is going to be the portal that you can use to submit your application. You can submit a My Penn State application to apply to Penn State, or you can use the Common App. Regardless of which one you use, make sure that you put your social security number, especially the Common App. They don't require that. But if you don't put your social security number, we need to look at that and match it up with your FAFSA. And if we don't have it, that could delay us being able to award you aid. So if that's the case, we'll show you how to fix that. It's pretty simple. But undergraduate admissions is going to collect this information from you initially from your application. they'll create a basic Penn State account and then send you an email with telling you how to set up your My Penn State account. And you want to get into the habit. Very important for students to check that account at least weekly. If there's anything that we need you to do or we need you to submit, there could be some documents that we requested you submit. If you're selected for verification or certification, you need to prove your citizenship status. You might need to submit proof of your high school graduation. All of those things are going to be located in your to-do list that you can access through My Penn State. But again, very important to try to check it at least weekly. I know that can be a little tricky for high school students to try to get them to do that, but they want to get into the habit of doing that. That's very important. Any communications that we use will go through those accounts, and they're attached to the students' emails as well. All right, so here are some things that you can do through My Penn State. You're able to review your application checklist. You're able to submit any missing materials you have for your application to Penn State. You're able to check the status of your application, and you'll also receive your admission decision through your My Penn State account. Now, keep in mind, for anybody that submits to early application or decision by November 1st, you are guaranteed to have your admission decision by Christmas time. If you submit after November 1st, your application, then it's a rolling admissions process and you'll be notified sometime in January, February, etc., depending upon when you apply. Okay. If you need to create an account, which you shouldn't have to do, because again, if you apply through My Penn State, it's going to be created for you. If you use the Common App, admissions is going to go through and create an account for you. Once they create that account for you, they're going to send you an email with a link to go ahead and set it up and get it set up and log in and create your passwords and everything. So once you get the email, just follow the instructions to create the account, and then you'll have access to that My Penn State portal. Okay, once you are done, you're going to receive what's called a unique Penn State user ID. That's usually an alphanumeric three letters, usually the first initial of your first name, your middle name, and your last name, followed by either 2, 3, or 4 digits. That's going to be your user ID. It'll also become the first part of your Penn State email. So when you log into your My Penn State portal, you're going to use that alphanumeric thing that you get with at psu.edu when you sign into My Penn State or any other Penn State sites. Don't get the user ID confused with the Penn State ID number. Penn State ID number is a 9-digit number, starts with the number 9. Again, the ID is that 3-digit letter followed by 2, 3, or 4 numbers. That'll become the first part of your email. Okay. So again, very important to make sure that your FAFSA connects to your Penn State account. Just because, again, it's processed by FAFSA doesn't mean that it's processed by Penn State. We have to have everything connected and matched up in order to be able to load and get you an aid offer. So once those completed FAFSA applications are sent to Penn State and we start loading them, we're going to be searching again those social security numbers to make sure they match. We also search the name, date of birth. Any of those things that don't match, it could delay the process for you receiving an award notification. If you're not sure if your social security number was added, you can easily do that through your My Penn State account. Okay, we're going to show you how to do that here in a minute. You can also do it through the accounts.psu.edu site as well. So again, at some point, once you have your FAFSA done and you have your My Penn State account set up, you definitely want to go in there and check and make sure those things are in there and make sure if there's any issues that need to be updated, you take care of that as quickly as you can. All right, as we said before, you will receive a notification once we've received your FAFSA, but again, we aren't going to load them until later on. So keep in mind, it'll probably be sometime in January. All right. So what if you need to update your social security number? Again, you can do that directly through your My Penn State account. So just log into My Penn State. Under the home, you're going to choose the submit social security number. You can see that over there on the left side of the screen. You're going to click on personal information and then social security number. Click on the plus button, and then you can enter the social security number. Click update and save it. Takes just a couple minutes, and then you're good to go. So again, once you get that My Penn State account access set up, we encourage you to log in there, check and make sure your social security number, everything is in there. So that way, you know, once your FAFSA comes in, everything should be good to go. This can also be done through the account management system at Penn State, which is accounts.psu.edu. Lots of other information in this system where you can update other basic information. You can manage settings, change passwords, access other various online resources and services. So a lot more that you can do through account management, but you can update the social security number there as well. If you would need to create the account and log into the account management system, this is what it would look like. You have choices for lots of different options there. If you're brand new to Penn State and need to set it up, you want to select obviously this one down here at the bottom of the page. Once you create that account, it's going to ask you for 3 different things. You have to type in your legal name. Again, you want to type it in exactly as it appears on your Social Security card. Your chosen or preferred name, if your name is different than what is your legal name. You put in your legal sex, your gender, your date of birth, Social Security number, email address, and home address. All this information is what then gets inputted to LionPATH, and that's what we use. And again, we're going to match up this information with what you put on your FAFSA, make sure everything is correct before we can load it. So that My Penn State account, again, gets you the basic information. You can log in, you can see your aid offer, you can look at the information about your application, all of that. But there's a lot more access that you'll get once you set up your LionPATH account. So when does that happen? That will happen after you become an officially admitted student. After you're officially admitted, you'll get emailed instructions on the next steps and how to go ahead and create that LionPATH account. Okay, once you're at Penn State, LionPATH is what you're going to use for pretty much everything that you need to do. Lots of things that you can do there. This is what it will look like, and these are some of the options of things that you'll be able to do. So again, you get access to a wide variety of account information. All your communications are going to be sent through LionPATH. Any holds that you might have on your account, like again, that high school graduation that we might need you to send in, any to-do list items, things that we need you to do or submit to us will be on there. Access to perform other various tasks, such as manage and view your financial aid, view account hold details, again, access your to-do list, pay your invoice or billing access is done through LionPATH as well. You'll gain access to academic information, register for courses, and many, many other things. So again, LionPATH is just a much more comprehensive program, obviously, compared to My Penn State. So just keep that in mind. There is a nice support button here. If you have any issues with LionPATH, click on that link and you can reach out to get some help that you need. But basically there where it says students, faculty, staff login, that's where you would log in. It's just lionpath.psu.edu. All right. So there's the login information, which I mentioned. Again, there's the button that you would click on. If you need help, the LionPATH help button's over there to the far right. One of the first things that we highly suggest that you do as soon as you set up your LionPATH account access is go through and grant delegated access. So what does delegated access mean? This means the people that you would like to be able to see information on your account, or people that you would like to be able to call in or email us to get specific information about your account. Okay, if a parent or somebody that you would want to be able to do that calls us or emails us and you have not set up delegated access for them, we can only give them basic information. We can't give any specific information about your account. So it's really easy to set up. So this is what the screen looks like. So once you log into LionPATH, you just go down through, click on your information, grant the delegated access. You're going to enter in name, email address of those that you want to give the delegated access to. And you're also going to have the choice of what you want them to be able to see. There's 5 different sections. You can give them access to see your financial aid, your class schedule, grades, holds, and your to-do list. You can give them access to all 5 items, or you can pick and choose which ones you want them to be able to see. Okay. Once you go through and input the information with the name and the email address, then it'll send an email invitation to the delegate. They'll receive that email and it gives them instructions on how to log in and create their ID and temporary password to set up their account. Once they set up their new password, then they'll have the ability to go in and look at the information that you gave them the options to be able to see. And again, the parents are going to call in and ask questions or email. You want to have that delegated access done. So the very first thing you should do once you get LionPATH set up, grant delegated access. And you can grant delegated access to whoever you choose. Not to be just parents, it can be other family members, maybe a brother or sister if they're helping you with the financial aid process. You get to dictate who you want to be able to see that information. All right. So now let's talk about Penn State's financial aid offering. So talk about when that's going to occur, talk about the next steps, and how that's going to work for new students. First thing, notice that it says at the top here, this is an estimated financial aid offer timeline. So number one, how are you going to know when you've been awarded? Like I said, we're not going to start loading FAFSAs probably till December, maybe January. Our goal is to start the awarding process in February. We want to try to have all of our aid offers out the door and out to students, hopefully by March 1st. That would give you 2 months then to be able to make your decision. May 1st is the formal acceptance deadline. So you'd have 2 months to compare your offers from the different schools, decide whether you're coming to Penn State. But again, this is estimated. That's our goal and our hope, but things can always be pushed back a little bit. Okay, so you're going to know that you're awarded and have an offer to check out when you get what's called the financial aid notification or FAN email. Again, if you're not checking your email regularly, you might get this notification, not even know that you've had an aid offer out there waiting for you to log into. Okay, so for new students, again, we're hoping to start doing that process in February. For students that would be starting in the summer, for both new students or continuing students, those students will be awarded in April. Our first summer session starts as soon as the spring session is done. And for returning students, or for students once you get to second, third, and fourth year, we don't award those students typically until June. Okay, so just keep those dates in mind as you are working throughout your Penn State career. Okay, so again, check that email. Make sure you look for that financial aid notification so that way you know when that comes, and you'll be able to log in and see what you've been offered. All right, once you get that email, here's how you go through and access your financial aid offer. So obviously, the first thing you're going to do is create that LionPATH account if you haven't done it yet. You do have to have access to LionPATH to be able to see that aid offer. You're going to log into LionPATH using that Penn State user ID and password that you created. At the top, you'll see the menus at the top. You want to click on the My Finances tab. You'll choose Financial Aid, and then you have to select the aid award year. So again, if you're starting next fall, that would be the 27 aid year. If you're starting in the summer, you might see 27 and 26 as well, because again, summer is part of the 25-26 aid year. So once you pick the year that you want, you'll click on View Award Detail to see what you've been offered. Now, these are estimated offers. Okay. It also will provide estimated costs for you, so you have an idea and you can start planning on what you might need to pay. But keep in mind, again, they are estimated. Okay, they're not exact, but they should be fairly close, get you pretty close. But just keep in mind that, again, everything is kind of estimated there. There's a couple reasons for that. We'll talk about that some here later. Once you decide that you definitely are coming to Penn State and you want to start accepting or declining any awards, that button is right there as well. That ability to start accepting or declining any awards will not be opened until May 1st after the acceptance deadline. So just something to keep in mind. You accept your offer before that, you're trying to accept any aid offers, that won't open until May 1st. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you might be selected to provide documents. Again, it's going to show up on your to-do list or in the hold section of your LionPATH account. So you might have to provide verification documents, which could be tax documents. It could be household forms. You might have to provide citizenship documents. You might be requested to submit proof of high school graduation, your formal official transcript. You could have to do what's called an IDED, or an identity and statement of educational purpose form. So all these different forms that we could request, how do you get them to us? Well, there's 4 ways to do that. Number one, you can always drop them off in person, either at University Park or even one of our Commonwealth campuses if you live closer to one of those campuses. You can mail it, and that would be the United States Postal Service or snail mail. So obviously we don't recommend that you use that because that can add some serious time to the processing that it takes to get your documents reviewed. Now, with the identity and educational purpose form I mentioned earlier, you do have to mail in an original copy if you do that at a notary. If you don't want to go and pay a notary to do that, you can stop in the office or at one of the Commonwealth campuses and do those forms in person. Okay. Fax is also an acceptable way. Okay. We don't accept anything through email, unfortunately. Our email system is not secured, so we can't take any documents through email. Fax works pretty well, but a lot of people don't have access to fax these days. So something to keep in mind is that if you go to let me think. I'm trying to think. Not Home Depot. I want to say Home Depot, but Office Depot, places like that, other places that have access to a fax machine, they usually will allow you to fax, but they do charge you a fee to do that. But for high school students, go talk to your guidance counselor because more than likely they have access to a fax machine. They'll fax you the documents that we need and they won't charge you any money to do so. We do have a virtual document upload system that's available through LionPATH and also through our website. at psu.edu. But here's what you need to keep in mind. If you only have a My Penn State account and you haven't set up full access to your LionPATH account yet, you do not have access to the upload system yet. So if you're going in, you're trying to upload and you can't do that, it's giving you an error message. That means that you probably haven't set up your full access to LionPATH yet, because you don't get that ability until that's set up. So just keep that in mind. So again, 4 ways to get us documents. Any of the 3 ways really works. We suggest upload or fax if you can, because the other 2 definitely are going to add a little bit of time to the processing of your documents. Here's some more information about the documents. Again, if you're going to drop it off in person, that would happen on the 1st floor of the Shields building. We have a new office called the Enrollment Services Center. We're going to talk about a little bit more here in a second. They are located on the 1st floor of the Shields building on the left side of the room. On the right side of that room is the bursar's office. So if you're dropping off documents, that's where you would go. No need to come up to the 3rd floor of Shields building anymore. If you're going to mail it, there is the mailing address. But again, that does add quite a bit of time to the processing, because it's going to take some time for it to be received, take some time for us to receive it and then image it into the system to make sure it's reviewed. So again, I would only mail it kind of as a last resort. If you can drop it off in person, fax it, or use the upload, that's what you want to do. Okay, there on our site, you can see the link to the upload a document tab that's on our website. The QR code there will take you to that as well. Okay. If you are attending one of our Commonwealth campuses and you have questions specific to the campus about what aid opportunities that they might have there, they do, for the most part, with one exception, all have financial aid staff at the campuses. They all have their own email and their own phone number. So that information is provided here. It can also be found on our psu.edu website or any of the campus websites. So again, if you have a question specific to the campus, reach out directly to them. The only exception being at Penn State Mount Alto. That's one of our Commonwealth campuses that has been selected to be closed down here in a couple of years. They do not have any financial aid staff. So if you're going to Penn State Mount Alto, direct all of your questions through University Park. Okay. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have the new Enrollment Services Center. So this is something that just kicked off here a couple of weeks ago. And really, it's something that we're all pretty excited about, because what happened in the future, or in the past, was a lot of students would come up to the 3rd floor in financial aid. We'd have to send you down to the 1st floor to the registrar of admissions. They might send you to the bursar. They might send you back up to us. So there was a lot of bounce back and forth with students kind of being sent all over within the Shields building. Now, with the Enrollment Services Center, there's staff trained there that can answer questions about financial aid, registrar admissions, all in one location. Again, it's on the left side of the 1st floor of the Shields building, and on the right side is the bursar. So realistically or theoretically, any question that a student could really need to have answered should be able to be done in that one location on the 1st floor of the Shields building. Okay, their phone number is 814-863-0000, and their email is esc@psu.edu. Again, keep in mind, parents, if you're calling in to ask questions, if you don't have that delegated access set up, or the student hasn't set that up for you, we're going to be very limited with what we can share with you. So just keep that in mind. As of right now, they are only taking in-person appointments. They're not doing any appointments, so no appointment necessary. You can walk in the 1st floor and get your questions answered. Maybe they'll change the process and do appointments down the line. We don't know. Like I said, it's fairly new, just started, and seems to be going very well. So something we're all pretty excited about. All right. Last thing before we get to some more questions here, we want to highlight a couple of additional webinars that we have coming up. Thursday, November 6th, we do have a 1st-year student scholarship basics. So any of those scholarship questions that you have, and I know that's going to be a lot of questions. We always get tons of scholarship questions. You want to make sure you put that on your calendar. Definitely attend that webinar. Thursday, November 6th, 5:30 to 6:30. Primarily directed for 1st-year students, but if you're a continuing student, we also will be able to share some information there for you as well. Right now, we have no webinar scheduled for December, but we do have a very important one, the big one, coming up in January. We don't know what Thursday it's going to be yet, but it is going to be a Thursday in January. Same time, 5:30 to 6:30. And that's going to be in combination with the bursar's office, and discuss everything about paying your bill at Penn State. So I'll talk about the billing due dates. I'll talk about payment options, the installment payment plan, talk about granting authorized payer access. We've talked about delegated access. That's what you need to do for financial aid. For the bursar, you also need to grant authorized payer access. So you've got to give access for both offices in order to be able to, again, speak on behalf of a student. So keep that in mind. Also talk about making sure that your aid is appearing on your bill and troubleshooting what things to take a look at in case aid is not on your bill for some reason. So very important webinar coming up. Again, date to be determined yet, but it'll be some Thursday in January. So definitely look out for that one. All right. That's all the information that I have to share with you tonight. So I want to just say thank you for everybody that was able to join us. We appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. We hope you learned some useful and helpful information. And now we'll take the rest of the time that we have left and answer any additional questions that you have. Damon is going to jump on here and take a look at the questions, and then we'll answer some things live here for you.
Hi, folks. So we're going to go over this live Q&A portion, or this Q&A portion then. You can gladly type your stuff in the chat. I'll read through them. But I saw a couple of things there earlier. So if a student, this is for you, Craig, obviously. If a student is doing like a master's degree, would they still complete the FAFSA application?
That's a good question. The answer is yeah, you would, because by completing the FAFSA, you're going to be eligible for some direct loans. Unfortunately, the only real aid for FAFSA for a master's program or graduate degrees is direct student loans, but you are eligible for up to $20,500 in direct student loans for the year. So it gives you that ability for a loan that's automatically going to be offered. Okay, if you don't have that filed, then your really only option is private loans. So keep that in mind. Also, a lot of graduate programs do offer scholarships, and they may require the FAFSA to be filed. A lot of our undergraduate scholarships do require the FAFSA as well. So it's always a good idea to file it, regardless if you're undergrad or graduate.
All right, perfect. I saw those kind of pop up in the chat here and there. For international students, because they are not eligible for the FAFSA, is there any other things they can be applying for?
Yeah, so unfortunately at Penn State, like I said, we only use the FAFSA to determine aid eligibility. So if you're not eligible for the FAFSA, your options are going to be somewhat limited, but you do have the ability to apply for scholarships to your academic college, and that is something that's going to be talked about in that next webinar next month. So definitely want to stop and check that out. Okay, we'll show you how to access the information for the academic colleges. Make sure you know what the deadlines and the processes are, because we have 14 different academic colleges and they all can be very different. So that's going to be the best bet for your international students. Also, international students will have the ability to apply for private loans, but unfortunately, you would have to have a cosigner. Almost all private loans require cosigners. And for international students, would have to have a cosigner living in the United States to qualify for. Okay. If you have any issues with any kind of paperwork, visa issues, things like that pertaining to being here as an international student, we highly suggest you work with the Office of Global Programs. So that would be www.global.psu.edu.
Awesome. So one of the questions that comes up every now and then, should both parents complete the FAFSA?
So yeah, it's kind of tricky. It used to be, initially they said that every parent had to have an FSA ID. It really comes down to who is your parent contributor going to be, and do they file a joint return? If your parents contributors are married, file a joint return, then only one person would need to have an FSA ID, because again, that information is going to be pulled directly uploaded from the IRS. So obviously it's a joint return, so it's going to be pulled in together automatically. If your parents are married but file separately for some reason, then both parents would need to have an FSA ID at that point. Okay, something else to keep in mind is in a situation of a split family where your biological parents might be divorced, depending upon which parent would be your contributor, if that parent is remarried, then your step parent would also have to have information on the FAFSA. Again, if they file a joint return, it would just be your biological parent for the FSA ID. If they file separately, it would be both that would need an FSA ID. Again, it can be a little tricky. So that wizard that's out there that we directed you to earlier is fantastic. It really can kind of help guide you. And if you have questions, certainly give us a call as well. But it can be a little bit tricky, but yeah, it's not too bad.
All right, perfect. And I saw one question came up earlier. So I know we used to do for the special circumstances, like if there is a change in income between the two tax years or any tax years, how would they go about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So your 26, 27 FAFSA is going to be based upon 24 tax information. So you might say, okay, well, what if my 25 taxes, right now, maybe a parent lost a job or there was some type of an inflated adjusted gross income for 24 that's not going to appear on 2025. Can anything be done? The answer is yes. We have what's called a special circumstance team that can do a reevaluation. But unfortunately, at Penn State, the process requires us to have the tax return filed. So if your reduction in income is occurring in 2025, we would not be able to review that for additional aid opportunities until the 25 taxes are filed in the spring. Good news is, if there is any change to the aid, it can be had retroactively. So you would still get you the same aid that you would get. It's just done after we can actually review the taxes. Now, if you're attending a different school for some reason, that might be totally different. Every school is a little bit different. So make sure you reach out to the school that you're looking at to consider if that's a situation you find yourself in, because their process could be different.
Perfect. I know that comes up. I saw it come up a couple times, so I definitely want to make sure we ask that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of touch too is when do we recommend are you having complete your to complete your FAFSA application? Like when's the best deadline to do so?
Yeah. So our recommended timeline, again, is by December 15th. So again, if you have it done by the end of the calendar year, you'll be in good shape. As I said, we're probably not going to start looking at awarding until February, but it's always the earlier the better. So we put December 15th out there. That way, we know you get to the holiday, Christmas, New Year's, all that stuff. It can be easy to kind of put it off and forget about it. We don't want you to do that because, again, if you do file it, after that first round of awarding, you could potentially miss out on some aid opportunities. Obviously, we want to make sure you have it filed well before that May 1st deadline for FIA if you're from Pennsylvania. One thing I didn't mention earlier, I don't think about FIA, is for FIA, they only look at the school that's listed in the first position. On your FAFSA, you can actually put up to 20 different schools you can send your information to. Okay, so if you're not sure what your first school choice is going to be, and you're from Pennsylvania, put whichever one you think is probably going to be the school you go to. If you decide to end up going to a different school, maybe you put a different school other than Penn State, you decide to come to Penn State. If you're from Pennsylvania, you want to go in and you want to change that and make sure Penn State is listed in that first position. Because again, if you're eligible for anything through FIA, they only look at that first school. It's easy to go through an update, but just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that.
Awesome, thank you. I saw it come up a couple times, so just want to make sure I asked that one. So one of the questions I see here is what exactly is student aid index or your student aid index there, and how is it calculated?
Yeah, so how it's calculated, we really don't know exactly either. I mean, it's formulas that the government decides. But yes, they take all the information from your tax return. Again, all that information is directly pulled in from your tax return. That in combination with your asset and your investment questions, there's the formulas that they use to create that SAI or student aid index. So it's a number that can be as low as minus 1,500. It can be as high as 999,999. So anywhere in between. That number or index basically just determines what aid you are eligible for. So for example, if that number is below around 7,000 or below, then you probably will qualify for a federal Pell Grant. If you're from the state of Pennsylvania and you apply for FIA, around 13,000 or below, roughly, you qualify for a state grant through FIA. It also determines things like whether you qualify for both subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans or only unsubsidized. So that number is used for a lot of different things. But the way they do it is they take your cost of attendance, which is going to be your tuition, room, board, all those fees, a lot of other miscellaneous fees, and that total cost of attendance. For example, an in-state student at Penn State University Park, that cost of attendance is probably around $36,000, maybe $37,000, but that's not what you're going to pay. You're probably going to pay closer to $32,000 because there's always extra room in there. But that cost of attendance sets the maximum amount of aid, including scholarships, loans, grants, everything that you can have for the year. You take the cost of attendance, subtract your SAI from the FAFSA calculation. That difference then determines your need. That's how they kind of calculate then what other aid sources you might be eligible for.
Perfect. And then I just saw it. How do folks go about applying for private loans outside of fee, and how is this done?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that we're going to talk about a lot in that billing webinar as well. So we'll go over all those different options. But yeah, so the student is going to get $5,500 in direct student loans. That's guaranteed from having a FAFSA filed. Obviously, usually not anywhere close to enough. So your other loan options become, if you have a FAFSA filed, a parent can apply for a Parent Plus loan or the private loans that Damon mentioned. Private loans, basically any lender that you choose to use. Basically, you're shopping for the best rate that you can get because those loans are in the student's name and they will almost always require a cosigner. The interest rate that you're going to get is going to be very much dependent upon the cosigner. It's full credit check, full debt to income ratio, the whole 9 yards, just like borrowing money for anything else. So whatever interest rate you're paying, keep in mind that's going to be deferred because they're not going to expect the student to pay that back while they're in school. So you want as low of interest rate as possible to try to not end up with a lot more money to pay back. We always suggest as well, if you're able to pay the interest only while you're in school, you can save yourself thousands and thousands of dollars by the time you're done. So something to keep in mind. You can always work with your lender to do that. But again, we'll talk about a lot of those things at that bursar and billing webinar as well. So
Awesome, thank you.
sure.
So if a lot of the times I've saw it popped up, if a student's not, they don't think they're going to get anything from the FAFSA, say they make too much, all that fun stuff, is it still recommended to file the FAFSA even though you may not quote unquote qualify for
Yeah,
anything?
that's a good question. But yeah, obviously we do recommend you file it. It's free. We know that you're going to be guaranteed the $5,500 in loans. It might all be unsubsidized depending upon your SAI and how that relates to that cost of attendance. But it's a loan that's automatically offered in the student's name with no other application required. So it's a really easy way for students to have a little bit of skin in the game, so to speak. And also, it's a really easy way to help students build their credit for when they graduate, because if they've got those loans in place and they start paying on them, it helps build their credit score and all those things. Number two, almost all scholarships at Penn State, especially for first year students, are going to require the FAFSA to be filed. So if you want to be considered for some of our scholarships, both for anything that we have in our office and the academic colleges, almost all of them do require the FAFSA to be filed. So good question.
All right.
One other thing real quick too, sorry. In order to be eligible for that Parent Plus loan, you have to have the FAFSA filed as well. So that just gives you another option for financing if you need it. So something to keep in mind as well.
I was going to my next question is how do they go for that Parent Plus loan?
Yeah, good question. Parent Plus loan, studentaid.gov. Very easy. It's a lot of advantages and disadvantages of that loan. I'll kind of give you an abbreviated version. On our website, there's tons of information. But the nice thing about the loan is you can apply, usually have an answer within 10 or 15 minutes. They really only look at bankruptcies, delinquencies, and student loans in default. If that's not the case, you're pretty much guaranteed to be eligible. Now, there are some changes coming next year. It used to be you could borrow up to the cost of attendance minus all the other aid that you needed. You could pretty much borrow as much as you wanted. With the changes made to the new bill that was passed recently, you're going to be limited to $20,000 per year for Parent Plus loan and only $65,000 total for each dependent student. So depending upon your costs and everything, you might not have enough to be able to borrow just from that. You might have to consider private loans as well. Hopefully you'll have other aid sources, scholarships, and things, so you won't be in that situation, but it's something I wanted to bring up to make sure you're aware of.
All right, perfect. So it looks like we have about six more minutes left in here, so we're just gonna try and keep on pushing through some questions. Just keep typing all your questions in the chat, and we'll kind of run through this as we can. If a student is using the GI Bill, how do they go about that process?
Yeah, so we have an Office of Veterans Affairs, so just veterans.psu.esu. Work with them. They will take care of all of that, make sure they get you qualified, make sure everything is situated for you. So just work with that office and they'll take care of it for you.
All right, perfect. And you mentioned FIA earlier, and I saw Kobe post that in the chat here. Is that only for Pennsylvania residents?
It is, but something to keep in mind, especially if you're an out-of-state student, you come into Penn State, you'll have to live on campus your first year. Second year, typically you're in an apartment. So if you're in an apartment, you're paying money and stuff on, you could be considered a resident of Pennsylvania after you've lived usually for a full year for the purposes of the state grant. Now, that will not change your tuition. You're still considered out of state for tuition purposes typically, but you could be considered in state for the purposes of the grant once you've lived here in your own apartment after a year. So that's something to look at. Now, again, that would only be if you qualify for certain things, but there are a lot of different programs. Even if you aren't quite eligible for the regular FIA grant, they do have some pretty nice other programs that you might be eligible for down the line. So definitely worth looking into. But yeah, it is only for Pennsylvania residents, at least initially, or at least until you establish residency in Pennsylvania.
All right, perfect. I know this will probably come up every now and later on after people file their FAFSA, but if they do have to make a correction, how do they go about that process?
So yeah, you can log in and correct the FAFSA. Typically, you can do that after last year. There were some delays to doing it. Now, I will mention this. You want to be very careful about going in and correcting things, especially if you go in and correct certain financial information, because once you make corrections, sometimes that can cause you to be potentially selected for verification. So obviously, if there's something that's wrong, like demographic information, we want to make sure that's all correct. But basically, you can log in. There's information on the studentaid.gov site that'll walk you through how to make corrections and so forth. Again, there's nice videos out there, tutorials that'll help walk you through the process.
Perfect. I know you and I get this a lot when we go out and about in our all of our adventures here. Does in-state or out-of-state matter when it comes to doing your FAFSA and getting any sort of aid with that?
It does not. Penn State, there's no difference in terms of your aid options for in-state or out-of-state. So you're all eligible for the same things. So, no difference there. Huh?
All right. I want to touch up too. For you, Craig, I know you kind of mentioned it earlier in the presentation, but how do those first year students go about applying? And we're kind of touching on it later, but like looking into like the first year scholarships, like what's a good place to start there?
Yeah, so it's going to depend upon whether you're, in an academic college when you start or not. Again, everything through our office is tied directly to the FAFSA, so there's really no applications. We do have some admission scholarships, but again, there's no application for it. You're automatically considered for most things. Where you're going to check on would be your academic college and what that process is. So that information can be found on our website at psu.edu/cost-aid. You search for scholarships. There's a link to the academic colleges. It'll show you a chart with all 14 different colleges. It'll tell you what the process is for first year students and continuing students. Deadlines can be as early as January all the way through May or June. So you do want to check that information out here soon. So that way, if your college has an early application deadline, you do want to submit it. I will say that the merit-based only money we have comes to the academic colleges, and they tend to use a retention reward model, meaning your chances at scholarships significantly increases in year 3 and 4 as compared to year 1 and 2. But if there's an application out there, definitely want to apply. And it is something you usually have to do every single year. Okay. And there's also lots of outside scholarships, and we're going to talk about that at that next webinar and spend a lot of time showing you how to access all those things.
All right, perfect. Looks like we'll have time for um one more question here. Trying to see if I can pull a good one to try and stump you a little bit. I know I will always get asked it. Um, do we work with the CSS profile at all?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do not. I mean, unfortunately, and fortunately, I guess, because the FAFSA is free, the CSSS profile is not free. It costs you $25 per your first school and $16 for every school after that. Okay, so definitely make sure you know whether your school requires it or not, because you don't want to be paying that money if you don't have to. If your parents make less than $100,000 adjusted gross income, I believe you can apply for the CSS profile for free. And there's a couple other things that could make it potentially free for you. But yeah, we don't use it at Penn State. If the school that you're thinking about going to does, I would suggest that you do it, because it does mean that there's a much better chance of you getting some additional aid sources from that school. But I can tell you that the FAFSA, again, takes about 45 minutes or less to complete. CSS profile, from what I've heard, can be 2 hours or more. It's much more intensive and a lot more to it than the FAFSA for sure.
All right, perfect. And last one I would say, how many students or how many schools can you submit with that FAFSA application?
Yeah, 20 schools. It used to be 10 and they changed it to 20 here a couple years ago. So you might say, well, what if I have more than 20? What do I do? And you go in, you submit the first 20. Once that's done, you go back in, you take schools out, you put more in there. You can do as many schools as you want. You just have to do it 20 at a time, and then you go back in and change it.
I see Jamie just wanted to put this one to answer live. He says CSS. Oh, he changed it. I guess he didn't want to answer it. All right, so I think that's all of our questions, folks. Thank you all for joining. And again, this record will be recorded. We posted, I think, usually within a 24 to 36 hours. So just look out for the email with that, and we'll be on our YouTube page. But thank you all for joining us. You have a great rest of your night, folks.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.